Hey everyone, Mike Del Prete here. I'm in Detroit on my way to spend the day with Rocket, and I'm pretty excited about this trip. I think getting into the field and actually visiting the companies doing this, looking for the Holy Grail, making some of the biggest moves in the space, is really the right way to do it. You can only sit in front of your computer and look at numbers so much, but in my mind, I had this vision. Rocket is a huge company. I want to walk the floors. I want to see what's actually happening inside the company. Not just talk to one person, not just read a report, but talk to a bunch of people and see it myself and see where it leads. So I'm here in Detroit. I got in last night. I'm a few minutes away from heading over there, and there's a bunch of things on my mind. And as I kind of go through my notes and think about the existing Holy Grail episodes and what I've discovered, there's a couple things that stand out with Rocket. First and foremost, I mean, Rocket is the biggest company doing anything in this space. So there's companies doing stuff in the space. There's big companies, but unless I'm missing something, Rocket's the biggest. It's huge. And that scale is really interesting because you can kind of come up with a good idea or a good product or a good process or, use AI for something. So there's the quality of the solution on one side of the equation, but on the other side is scale. If you can do this for 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, a million consumers. Right now, Rocket combined with Mr. Cooper is servicing almost 10 million mortgages across the US, right? That's huge. So Rocket has the scale, and typically with the scale comes the resources to do stuff. And you start seeing different capabilities and abilities and benefits when you go from 10 to 100 to 1,000 to a million. Right? What can you learn from a million data points or 100 million data points that you couldn't get out of just 10 or 30? So I'm super interested to see what that scale looks like in action. The second thing, which I alluded to, is this servicing component. So in the past, looking backwards, the holy grail of real estate, I would posit, kind of combines brokerage and mortgage. Right. So there's a flywheel between brokerage and mortgage. Somebody's searching for a home, they're working with an agent. Can you attach a mortgage as well? Rocket is added this other component of the flywheel, which is servicing. And before the Mr. Cooper acquisition, that was something I was unfamiliar with. So servicing is somebody who already has a mortgage, right? If you have a mortgage and you get a bill every month and you pay it, that's servicing. So that's an interesting second part of the flywheel, right? If you think about just a consumer and their life cycle and what they're doing, right? If you're on a website, in Rocket's case, like Redfin, because they own Redfin, if you're on a website searching for homes, oh, we know this person's searching for homes. Let's see if we can get them a mortgage. On the flip side, a homeowner is already in a home, they're paying for a mortgage. How do we, if they're starting to think about upgrading, searching for a new home, how do we get them into the ecosystem and get them a new mortgage, right? If you're paying a bill every month to a mortgage company, are you going to go to them for your next mortgage? So these are, I don't know how quite to visualize it, but on both sides of the equation here, these flywheels, right? Somebody's searching for a home, their mortgage is being serviced by a company. Right now, to my understanding, I would say Rocket is the only company, definitely at this scale, that has both of those, that is doing those. It has a major portal in terms of Redfin, and it has a major servicing arm in terms of Mr. Cooper, which is all rolled in to this one Rocket ecosystem. So it's easy to see that and read about it in a deck, but I want to see it in action. And I'm going to be talking to the people responsible for that today. So I definitely want to dig in there. Um, the other thing on my mind is Rocket's a direct to consumer company, right? They run Super Bowl ads. They're going direct to consumers. How do you market the idea of a one-stop shop, the Holy Grail, to consumers? What does that billboard say? What does the Super Bowl commercial say? Because that really tests this emerging thesis around what do consumers care about or don't care about. I've actually heard it a surprising number of times, something along the lines of consumers just don't care. They don't care where they get their mortgage from, or rather, they don't care if it's the same company where they get their brokerage and mortgage and servicing from. It just really doesn't matter, right? You want the best experience for each component. So Rocket, I would say, has a different thesis. And I want to dive into that. And they're experts at marketing to consumers. So how is this going to get distilled down into a easily digestible message to consumers that actually moves the needle? Some of the hypotheses that, we've looked at before have been ease, just that it's, simple, easier to do. There have been cost savings, which has been the thing that Rocket has talked about in the past. This potential of 25K savings if you start bundle and save. Or is it confidence? And that really comes from my last episode where we talked about, yeah, if you put it all together, your deal is just simply more likely to close, right? It's not going to fall through the cracks. And related to that, again, going back to Rocket, are they all on the same platform, the same tech, the same system? And does that actually help? So super excited. I'm really meeting with a veritable who's who at Rocket and Redfin today, and I'm excited for that. Talk to a whole bunch of leaders and see what happens. All right, it's been a few days since my visit to Detroit and hanging out with a whole bunch of great Rocket and Redfin folks. So it's taken me a couple days to kind of digest what I've learned, go through my notes, try to sum that up into some sort of key learnings or insights out of this. And I want to be clear as I start this one out. This podcast episode is me talking. Right, I'm not talking to anyone else. I didn't record while I was in Detroit. I didn't try to get anybody on the phone or anything like that. And the reason is, I mean, the whole reason I'm doing these visits and I'm doing this Holy Grail podcast, the goal is for me to learn and explore and get smarter. The podcast is one offshoot of that, right? The goal is not the podcast. I'm not showing up with a production team. The goal is not to get some flashy copy or clips to make people listen. I don't care if 10 people listen or 1,000 people listen, right? Really, I care about me learning a lot, getting smarter, and as part of that, I'm gonna invite you in to see my process, be part of this, and then publish some stuff out there. So for me to do a really great job at that, I needed to be 100% focused on talking and learning and asking questions, and not pulling out podcast equipment and microphones and dealing with audio levels. So that's it, and I hope you can appreciate that. Like, the goal here is not entertainment; it's quality. It's quality insights, and that's my promise to you, right? Is I'm focused on learning and I'm passing that on. When I think about this and structure what I want to talk about, one place to start is this idea of the mortgage attach rate, right? We have this idea so far from the search for the Holy Grail that this 20% attach rate was the limit. It was this ceiling. And one thing that Rocket has talked about in the past was, oh, hey, with our Redfin agents, we're getting a 50% attach rate. So I went out there, I wanted to dig into that. I'm very skeptical. Like, what's the numerator? What's the denominator? Is that real? Like, that can't possibly be real, because pre-acquisition, Redfin was getting 20, maybe 25, 27% attach. So I wanted to look into that. And I did do that. And I do have some answers that I'll talk about later. But the thing that surprised me was that wasn't the key number. That's not the thing that's been rattling around in my head afterwards. It's actually a bigger number, which is involving the servicing. And that's that Mr. Cooper acquisition. So I'll get into all of that later. But if you're just joining me and jumping in, what is the search for the Holy Grail? Right? It's this idea of, the Grail is the one-stop shop in real estate: search, brokerage, mortgage, title, all under one roof. And it's not new. Companies have been trying to do this for over a decade, and companies have been doing it for over a decade. Real estate portals, brokerages, all of that. There's been this attach rate ceiling, kind of around 20%, that nobody's really been able to push through at scale. There's a workflow that's fundamentally remained unchanged for the past decade or two, in terms of how you do this. And there's the consumer question. Why would consumers go to a one-stop shop? Why don't consumers price shop mortgages? Why do they really only go to one lender? How do you wrap that all up? And how do you wrap it up with an actual benefit to consumers? And that's the thing I've keep coming back to in this. And when I talk to people, the response is, well, consumers don't want it. And that's a question. Do consumers want a one-stop shop? Do they not? Or do consumers want something else? Do they want price, right? Is it a cheaper price? Do they want ease? Do they want confidence? And that's also something I dug into with Rocket. So stay tuned for all of that stuff as well. All right. So the first thing that hit me about the Rocket and the Detroit visit was that nobody at Rocket ever leaves. And what I mean by that is the average tenure of the folks I was meeting with, was probably about 20 years. I met people there that have been at Rocket for 18, 21, 26 years. It seems like they were birthed on the sales floor and they've just spent their whole life at Rocket. That stuck out. I mean, I know a lot of people in real estate have, kind of been in real estate for quite a while. But this isn't some sort of, new company or new disruptor that's been at it for 2 years or 5 years. And I think everybody's known Rocket is a juggernaut. But the deep, deep, deep bench of experience they have, senior leadership, executive, all through the organization really, is incredible. And I think with that, you get a lot of great experience, and you're going to be in a position to leverage off that. Like simply, what you're doing. So I think that's been really interesting. I've said this before, I think on the last episode, this idea of an object in motion stays in motion unless there's a reason to leave. Turns out there isn't really a reason to leave Rocket. People generally seem to love it working there. And there was a great energy walking around. And I appreciate all the time everybody gave me. And, I walked a couple different sales floors, chatted with people on there. You learn a lot about the company based on what's on the wall, the posters, the awards, the banners, all of that. And you learn a lot just by walking and listening, listening to bells ringing, people cheering, folks walking around. I mean, in a world of AI where data centers in Minnesota somewhere, beeping and blinking and doing all this stuff, this was very people driven. There were people everywhere doing things, talking to other people. And I think, when it comes to real estate, when it comes to mortgage, that's so important. So, things like culture, they get brought up a lot. And yeah, I don't know. I really reflect that I saw a very strong culture there, right? It's not about pricing, it's not about the product, it's not about the AI. There was a very strong, not just sales culture, but you do get the sense that these folks really want to help consumers. They want to help people buy a house or refinance a house. And you get that. You get that in what you hear listening to people, what you read on the wall. Um, and I know it's a bit cliche, right? But that's, that is the sense I came away with. And I think if I came away with that, if you're going to be working there, you're probably going to come away with it too. So that was really the first clue, first observation that I took away. The second observation, again, that's stuck in my mind here, is, maybe the Holy Grail only works if you like the people you're working with and you want to work with those people and you're not necessarily incentivized to make it work, but it's this idea of it's really a people business, and it only works if you like the people you're working with. And I got that sense out of the whole Redfin acquisition by Rocket. Starting to dig into that 50% attached number. I asked him, I'm like, what? How? Like, how the heck did you get to 50%? You were at 27% before the acquisition. If it was so easy to kind of, hit a button and get it to 50, why didn't you do it before? Why didn't anybody do it before? And there's no special product driving that, like with Fly Homes or the Power Buyers, where it's buy before you sell, and you kind of lead with the product. It was still kind of the normal thing. And yes, Redfin agents are part of the team. their W-2s, so they, quote unquote, air quotes here, control them. But again, you can't control an agent. You can't force them to do anything. And the reason I was given was, oh, we actually like each other. The Rocket loan officers, whether they're in Detroit or local in the field, and the Redfin agents, they get together. They hang out. They like each other. They go to events. The incentive to work there is not necessarily, I mean, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's not necessarily a KPI or a column in an Excel spreadsheet. It's that, these people have kind of drank the Rocket Kool-Aid. I mean, Rocket's a bit crazy, Redfin's crazy, right? There is this strong sense of culture there, but they're all drinking the same Kool-Aid and they want to win together, They want to, they're very excited and motivated to do something, and they like each other, so they want to make it work. And I think that reciprocal good feeling really came across, and that was kind of what was presented to me. So again, I can't speak definitively about how how accurate that is in the field everywhere, but in general, that was kind of it. It's not technology integration, it's not our bundled pricing for this, that, or the other. It's if you want to get your agent to refer your in-house or your mortgage partner business, they should probably like each other. And it's interesting because you think of other examples, and I don't want to name names here because I haven't done the field work yet, but you do hear about other examples where um, there might not be that personal like, right? I'm sending a mortgage lead over to our mortgage business because I have to, or because it's part of my KPIs, or it's part of my I'm hesitating here because like there's RESPA laws and whatnot, and I don't want to assert that somebody's breaking the law, but there's these ideas like, oh, you have to. I don't really want to, but I have to do a mortgage lead over here versus actually liking that. And feeling like everybody involved is on the same team versus some sort of adversarial thing, right? If you're not owned by the same company and a company is kind of buying leads or a lead partner and fulfilling those, there's a different kind of more adversarial thing. Like, oh, I don't necessarily want to be doing this, but I am doing this. It kind of reminds me of, my local internet service provider, my local power company, right? That's it. I don't know many people that love theirs, but when you only have one choice and you're kind of stuck with them, it feels like this battle. Or maybe health insurance is another example, right? Everything feels like a battle. I don't want to necessarily have to go down this path, but I have to. That's a lot different than this cooperative community feel. And I got the sense that the Rocket Redfin partnership is more of that cooperative community feel. So that, that at the end of the day, the boring truth under all of that is it's not necessarily tech, it's that the bundles work when the partners want them to, and they die when they don't. So getting everybody on the same page, super, super important. Now to dive into that a little bit more, the next clue or observation I have here is around traffic, quality traffic, right? Not just traffic. And the idea that this was mentioned to me during my visit, this super funnel. I thought that was interesting, right? It's not a super app, it's not a one-stop shop, it's not a Holy Grail. Although most everyone I met with was familiar with my Holy Grail analogy and my search. But they talked about this idea of a super funnel, and that's kind of throwing everything in at the top. So it's not just that can be brokerage traffic, website traffic from Redfin, but also servicing and also just the core Rocket mortgage business. Putting everything there. And when I chatted with the Redfin folks, I really got a strong sense that they weren't just trying to get that number up, traffic. It's about, quality over quantity. They and I mean, if you look at, the self-reported or the third-party traffic numbers for real estate portals, that number is pretty close to the population of the United States. Once you exclude like the really young, the really old, and you kind of combine families, maybe it's actually bigger, right? I mean, it's huge. So people are browsing websites as a form of entertainment. They're not all serious buyers. The percentage of serious buyers might be 1% of the total traffic, and that seems to be what Redfin is focused on. That 1%. We don't need 150 million monthly uniques, whatever that means. We need serious buyers to be coming to Redfin when they're ready to get serious. And that's how we're going to kind of bring them into our ecosystem and lead them through. We need quality traffic to turn into quality leads. They're not interested in any sort of vanity metrics there. They're looking for those serious, high intent buyers. And you know, ground this is kind of expanding from just traffic, but Chicago. Chicago in the industry right now is kind of ground zero for a lot of stuff going on. MRED, Compass, Zillow, and also Redfin and Rocket. So I was shown, and I'll release some of this stuff at some point, but I was shown some of the ads that Rocket and Redfin are running in the Chicago market, and they're quite interesting, right? They're doing exactly what we've been talking about, and they're almost exactly the screenshots I've been showing for years when I talk about the power of exclusive inventory. With taglines like "more houses than anywhere else, find it first," or we have more listings you can't see anywhere else. See them first on Redfin. It's really going after the one thing that consumers care about when they're looking to find houses for sale. Inventory, listings, right? That's it. So Redfin, because of this whole, debacle between MRED and Zillow and cutting off the listing feeds, and it's coming back, and the Compass partnership with Redfin to give Redfin access to those coming soon listings that are only available on Redfin. There really is a listing advantage in Chicago, and Redfin is advertising off of that fact, which is natural and kind of what you'd expect them to do. And I'm told that it's having a significant impact on not just traffic in Chicago, but leads. So that little flywheel appears to be working right there, and I think that's fascinating. Now, when I asked Jason at Redfin, I was like, "Hey, if Varun, Rocket's CEO, kind of burst into the room right now and said, 'Hey, Jason, I got $100 million. I want you to invest it anywhere in the business. Where would it go?'" His answer, after thinking about it, for quite a while, was, "I'd throw it into the top of the funnel." I think he sees the machine working, sees where the technology is, the product, listings, kind of all the chips on the board, and thought, you know what, we just need to get this in front of more people. Because the more people I can get in the top of the funnel, the super funnel, I know we can convert them. I know we can do a good job for each and every one of these people. So I would just think, all right, how do I go in and how do I do that? The last thing I want to mention on this is, I was asking the Redfin folks, like, "Hey, what have you learned?" Right? You've been through quite a bit. You were at Redfin, then you got acquired, and now you're part of this other bigger, different company. Um, what have you learned about the process of running the business? And again, after a good amount of consideration, the answer I was given back was, again, it's kind of this. I wouldn't necessarily think of it, and maybe it's boring, but it's how you carve up the map in terms of lead distribution and having agents assigned to territories. And the example was zip codes. People don't buy houses based on zip codes. That's not how they think about it, right? They're not like, "Oh, I want to buy a house in this zip code." It's different. It's geographic. It's based on, I don't know, streets, roads, neighborhoods, schools, coffee shops, shopping centers, all of that. So this really basic thing, like, oh, how do we divvy up the map? Maybe it makes sense, from the top down, but from the bottom up, it might not. And that was a really interesting learning out of that they shared with me. All right, so to jump into the real meat and potatoes out of this, servicing. So, and this is like the number behind the number. I didn't get it. I mean, I know what servicing is. I didn't really think about it or track it very much at all before Rocket acquired Mr. Cooper, or even before I spent the time in Detroit. But I was actually pretty skeptical of it. So this idea of mortgage servicing, like once somebody applies for a mortgage, they get it from Rocket. That mortgage is then sold off and it's also serviced. And what that means is it's billing, right? It's kind of who you mail your check to every month. That's somebody servicing the mortgage. Um, I want to say typically, but I don't actually know if it's typical. I just don't know. Typically that gets sold off to another company. Before the acquisition, Rocket was originating mortgages, and then they also decided to start servicing the mortgages as well. And, I thought to myself, man, how boring. And how is there a benefit? If I'm just writing a check every month, my mortgage check to a company, why do you think I'm going to start with them when it's time to buy a new home? It's like I'm just the relationship I have is just writing a check. That doesn't make them my partner, my financing partner to look for a new home. I'm going to go to a big real estate portal. I'm going to talk to an agent I know. But I think I was, I don't know, proven wrong, or at least my mind has been changed. So it starts with, I mean, I guess it starts with the philosophy. So I asked, I got to chat with a couple people involved in Rocket's servicing operation now. And I asked them, one of the questions was, why did you get into this? Yeah, I don't know when Rocket first started servicing loans, call it 10 years ago, but why did you do it? Why, it's just billing. And they're like, no, it's not billing, Mike. It's an opportunity to have a relationship with this person. I'm like, well, what does that mean? And well, we want to have a relationship. And this is a way to just keep talking to somebody on a regular basis. And yeah, it's like, yes, you are sending a bill, but you can make the bill pay experience wonderful. I mean, you can just make it as good as it can be, right? Imagine, you paying your bills, whoever it is. Like I've been there, right? There's good bill paying experiences and bad bill paying experiences. And with mortgage, you can throw a dashboard behind that. So I'm not just paying my bill, but I'm seeing a dashboard, total loan amount, how much I've paid. And maybe on that dashboard, there's some calculators, right? Do I want to pay a little bit more money this month? What does my principal versus interest look like? How are property taxes changing over time? Escrow, how is that calculation going? And being able to explain that. Maybe there's a video explainer on that. And you know what? If there's an opportunity to refinance, kind of a big red button in the middle that says like refinance now, you can save $173 a month, right? That all comes from servicing, and those are all touch points, opportunities to build and maintain a relationship with somebody and kind of grow the brand, grow the experience, grow the trust. So out of that, it kind of made sense. Oh, and then the last bit was, if somebody gets into trouble paying their mortgage, I mean, Rocket wants to keep people in homes. So, they're not just going to keep billing somebody like hitting your head against the wall if they can't afford to pay or if they're getting late. So they want to keep people in there. So if trouble arises, Rocket is there to be able to. They want to be there to be able to help somebody through the process. And even through natural disasters, we were talking about Hurricane Katrina, or if there's wildfires, right? If a home is, God forbid, lost, or there's some sort of, damage or insurance claim out of that, Rocket wants to be your advisor that you call, right? They want to help out. They want that opportunity. They want the at bat to be able to be an awesome partner, because they view all of that adding up to building a actual relationship with somebody after the purchase of a home, which is something we hear about a lot in real estate, typically from the real estate agent angle, right? You help somebody buy a home. Okay, they're in. Now what? How, as a real estate agent, how do you stay in touch with them? Are you going to send them a fruit basket every year, a little handwritten note, congratulations, but then what? And most, collective wisdom is that most agents do a quote unquote bad job at that. I don't know how you do a bad job at something you're manufacturing. Like, how do you, why? After you buy a home, I don't know why people would want to stay in touch with a real estate agent. But anyway, this is a different version of that, the mortgage version, the mortgage servicing version of that. And it really clicked in my mind. So anyway, some of the numbers. I mean, this blew me away. The servicing recapture rate is already 80%, 80 on refis. Wow, that's a lot. It kinda makes sense, right? If you're writing this monthly check and Rocket notices an opportunity to refi and save money, if somebody's gonna refi, 80% of them stick with Rocket on that. That's pretty powerful. And I think there's questions around, how you do that, right? Are you texting somebody, calling them? Is it in a dashboard? But again, without getting into the nitty-gritty details and Rocket's secret sauce, there's an opportunity there to really build that relationship. And 80%, holy crap, like that's working. And then on purchases, that recapture rate is already 40 to 50%. Like, that's today, that's not a target. So that's when it all really hit me. I was like, "Wow, this really is a flywheel." It's easy to see it on an investor presentation for quarterly earnings, but to hear it in person and to think about that is crazy. And the analogy that I thought about was, like a hydroelectric dam, You have a dam, it generates power, like it's working, the wheel's spinning. You've got a dam behind it, a whole bunch of water, pushing through. Rocket was doing that before the acquisition, but now with Mr. Cooper, it's like adding a whole new reservoir. I don't, off the top of my head, know the volume there, but I know combined it's about 10 million consumers. But imagine you got a hydro dam working well with a reservoir, and then you just double the size of the reservoir. Holy cow, that's what we're talking about here. And that is to date, that's refi and on purchase, it's working. And you can imagine, I did not get the sense that anybody at Rocket was kind of totally happy with where they're at and was just sitting around and calling it in. They're constantly looking to do more, improve. So while I was impressed by these numbers, I can't say that they were, and there was an opportunity there. They see that opportunity to really do more. And so the idea here is that, attaching the mortgage, like through Redfin or otherwise, gets you the consumer once, but it's that servicing recapture that keeps them there. It sounds like hyperbole, but for the next 30 years. And that, yeah, I'm convinced, or at least my mind has been changed from skepticism to cautious optimism slash, holy cow, you're at these numbers already. And the key here is scale, right? It's not, we've got 80% and 40 to 50%, but you look at the denominator there and it's 10 million servicing clients. That's quite a bit. So this is not only another opportunity for Rocket to have a relationship with somebody after the purchase, but to keep them in the ecosystem, right? And again, coming back to what I learned last time, an object in motion stays in motion. So a consumer in an ecosystem is going to stay in that ecosystem unless there's a reason to leave. And Rocket is trying to give them a lot of reasons to stay and no reason to leave whatsoever. All right, so the next big thing to unpack here was the marketing. What's the consumer pitch? And I told the team over there, and they were great. They gave me some time with marketing and brand folks. But I told them, I'm like, okay, how are you going to throw this up on a billboard? And, I'm not obsessed with outdoor advertising, but I love the billboard question because it forces you to distill down your pitch into one sentence or a collection of words that you can read as you're driving by a billboard at 60 miles an hour. And that's a tough proposition. Not everybody can do that. So, I wanted to, and I got to sit down with some of the marketing geniuses over there. And Rocket is really good at this, right? This is a company that runs Super Bowl ads. They've, if I'm remembering my numbers, they're spending kind of close to $1 billion a year in advertising and marketing. And this is something they've been doing for decades. They're really good at it. Their offices were filled with awards, marketing awards they've got, and examples of past campaigns. So, I wanted to know kind of how they were thinking about the pitch to consumers because, I'm learning a bit through this Holy Grail search, and what do consumers care about? Is it price? Is it ease? Is it confidence? What is that? What does that look like? So throughout the entire day, nobody, um, I don't think anybody really sold me on the idea of price. Right? They talked about price. And as a big company with a lot of scale and a lot of lines of business, if they can get somebody to the ecosystem, I mean, it's pretty simple. When Varun was in my class speaking to my students, he said, yeah, it's kind of, again, he distilled it down and simplified it. There's cost of customer acquisition and there's lifetime value. So if we can decrease the cost of customer acquisition, we can kind of capture more of the lifetime value of that customer, but then we have more margin to play with, and we can give it back. We can offer discounts. We can. That's where the bundle and save comes from. So all of this kind of adds up into that, right? If they can keep. If they can attach mortgage through Redfin, okay, great. They spend once to capture a customer, and then they keep them in the ecosystem. And once they've attached them once, if they're servicing that client, they're going to be there for the next transaction, whether that's refi or purchase. So you have this balanced equation where customer acquisition cost keeps coming down. Lifetime value might actually go up because you're capturing. It's such a I don't know, militant word, but you're attaching more services to that, right? Oh, we can do brokerage and mortgage and refi, right? You start doing that, the equation starts to change, and there's a delta in the middle, and that could be the margin. And that margin can go to the company and the shareholders and make everybody rich, or the margin can go back to the consumer. Or realistically, it's probably 50-50. Well, I don't know what it is realistically, but it could be a split. But it can go back to the consumer. So these, I think Rocket's in the middle of these programs, but there's kind of this sliding scale of bundle and save, where you can save anywhere from, eh, and again, I don't have the exact details in the market, but it was something along the lines of, save 6K if you work with if you kind of combine brokerage, buying a new place with financing, 6K, or 12K if you buy and sell with us, or it could be 20K if you buy and sell and get serviced and kind of all this stuff over time. But there's real savings there. But no, the point is nobody in these meetings kind of led with that. They're like, oh, Mike, we're going to get the Holy Grail to work because we're going to offer people up to 20K in savings. It was more so it wasn't price, but it was more about the confidence and the trust. And when we started, brainstorming collectively, what would be up on the billboard? Something along the lines of from search to sale, we've got your back. And I thought that was good. And really for me, that kind of bled this idea of confidence, you know? It's not 1%. Well, what does a percent mean? A percent of what? People have to do math. You're asking somebody to do math. So it's not a percent, and it's not, oh, save 5K or 6K. It's like, well, yeah, okay, that's it. But really, buying real estate is hard. And from searching to selling, either selling your property or buying another property, a big company kind of having your back, giving you the confidence and trust, a phone number you can call, great technology, a great platform you can use. Gives you that confidence and trust. It's not just a cheaper rate, it's all of that. And it was also said to me during that day that consumers, they do want a fair and competitive price in this. Like, this is their observations. Again, people there for decades and helping tens and tens of thousands, maybe hundreds, I mean millions. They have 10 million servicing clients. Is that the observation there is consumers want a fair and competitive price, but not necessarily the best, right? The number one aspect, and I really poked at this and drilled into it, the number one thing that consumers want in this is trust. And if you think about that billboard, right? We've got your back. That's trust. Think about the trust fall. It's all about trust. So that was a big takeaway for me there. Lastly, kind of an interesting bit of conversation we got into. When you do talk about savings, I mean, this is just an interesting thing for everyone to think about. Think about how it's delivered to somebody, because if it's an asterisk on a rate sheet, or, you're sitting at the closing table and you're looking through numbers and in a printed out spreadsheet, that's one way to give somebody savings. The other way is to mail them an actual check. And, if you're buying a $400,000 home and you're saving 6K and you're looking through the sheet, what's the difference? What I get it. I can see a number. Um, but that's different versus, having a check handed to you for $6,000. And I know at the end of the day, it's the same. It's totally the same, but it's not. It's different, and in real estate and many things in life, there's the head and the heart. And yeah, the head gets it. It's the same. But in terms of how it feels, it probably feels a lot different to get handed a check for 6 grand from Rocket or Redfin, and then go through and deposit that. You're just kind of interacting with this money a couple times as opposed to just seeing a number on a sheet. So I thought that was interesting. And again, I'm not saying this is something they're doing or not doing, but it got brought up in that conversation, and I wanted to pass it on because I thought that was a really interesting, great example of, there's a lot of psychology at play in all of this. And sometimes savings could and should be more than just a little asterisk or a little number on a rate sheet somewhere. Now, to circle back to that 50% attach rate from Redfin, so one thing that occurred to me while I was there is Compass got brought up a lot more than I was expecting. And, there's a partnership between Rocket and Redfin and Compass. Everybody knows that. And it's not like I didn't expect anybody to mention it, but I was surprised, right? A lot of people in a lot of different groups knew about the Compass partnership and talked about how excited they were about it and how important it was. So I think to me that flagged this idea that, the Rocket Redfin Compass partnership, and there's a lot of aspects there, right? And I've talked I did a podcast with Joe Rath about that. So you could listen to that if you want to dig in more. But, part of it is around inventory, where Compass's coming soon listings are going to Redfin, creating this exclusive inventory wedge where you can find, homes first on Redfin in a market like Chicago, but it is nationwide. But the other part of that is this mortgage partnership, right? Where if you're using a Compass agent and you decide to finance with Rocket, they can get you a discount, that kind of 5, 6K savings or a rate buy down, whatever it might be. But what was interesting is this idea of a ladder and kind of talking about own channels versus an open ecosystem. So what I mean by the ladder was, uh, I got it kind of goes Redfin, Compass, everyone else, and it may be not prioritized, maybe it is, but when Rocket's talking about the Holy Grail and this ecosystem, the first kind of concentric ring they're talking about is our agents, our Redfin agents. And there's a couple thousand Redfin agents, and that's where that 50% attaches. And they're all, they all get the paychecks from the same company, and they hang out at the same events, and they know each other, and they like each other. They wear each other's swag, right? Whatever that is. The next concentric ring, though, is Compass. There's a couple 100,000 Compass and Compass International Holdings affiliated agents that are, I don't know, probably being introduced to this idea, being offered opportunities to work with Rocket to provide their sellers actual savings. And I mean, it's not like you think about it like that. It's not a trick. When we're talking about affordability and a lot of debate online these days talking about affordability, it's I don't know, theoretical or kind of, biased one way or the other. But at the end of the day, affordability is real. And there is a program out here with Rocket and Compass where buyers can save 5, 6K or maybe 12K if they buy and sell. Tho- those are real numbers. That's real savings. Um, and again, it's not a trick. It's an opportunity for these buyers. to do, and they're putting together two, big legit companies. I mean, Rocket backing this up. They've definitely done this before. They know what they're doing. So I think it's interesting just to reflect on that. But I think the question will be is kind of if that ladder, and then after Compass comes everyone else, and it's not everyone else in lowercase letters and small font size. It's everyone else. It's this open ecosystem. I fully got the sense that Rocket would, like to move in that direction. And I hesitate because the deal with Compass is exclusive. I'm not privy to knowing exactly what that means. I haven't seen the agreement, but there's aspects of it that are exclusive. So I think they'll need to figure that out. But uh, I didn't get the sense that the long-term plan here was to stop at Redfin agents and Compass agents. There is opportunity for other agents out there to be able to be part of this ecosystem somehow. And I mean, an agent can already do that anyway, right? You can work with Rocket, and be a partner there, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be a two-way partnership, but there is the sense of kind of continuing to move towards more of an open ecosystem out of all that. So I'm interested in how that ladder progresses. If you have 50% attached with the Redfin agents, I mean, is that it? Does it go to 60? Does it go to 70? I mean, that would be unheard of, but maybe. What does the attach rate look like for Compass agents over time? It's clearly going to be different. It's probably almost certainly going to be lower, but how low? And can they get it higher over time? And I mean, you have 2,000 Redfin agents versus hundreds of thousands of affiliated agents with Compass. There's a scale question there. So even if it's, if that attach rate is not 50%, but if it's 10%, that's a big, 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 big needle mover. And again, to my earlier point, if it's 10%, it's not just money in Compass or Rocket's pocketbook going to shareholders, right? There's savings. There's $6,000 to $12,000 of savings as well to consumers. So you can kind of add all of that up and say, listen, consumers are home buyers, first-time home buyers, anytime home buyers. They're saving this much money simply by kind of combining and saving. So it'll be fascinating to watch that play out. The last observation I want to share is around AI. And what occurred to me is during my visit there, nobody pitched me AI. We did not have an AI themed meeting. It wasn't, we never started out by talking about AI or anything like that. It was just something that kind of subtly weaved its way in and out of conversations, whether somebody brought it up or I pushed at it. It wasn't forced, which felt really good. Those that know me know that man, I mean, my opinions on AI are all over the place, but I don't think it should be like a separate mode in everything we do. The apps that I use, there's like what little crystals or icons, sparkles, or I can, go to the AI version and start talking. And it's like, I don't want to do that, right? I think it should just be integrated. I think the smart, best way to do that is just, kind of subtly integrate AI into everything you're doing. And maybe it's front and center, maybe it's in the back end. I don't want to log into QuickBooks and get, inundated with a chat interface with an AI bot to talk about my invoices. Like, no interest. That's actually just friction. And I kind of noticed the same thing being with Rocket, talking about all of the areas. So, they definitely are using AI, and that's something they talk about in the earnings calls, and that it is something people were talking about. And I saw it, going through the sales floor, looking at the technology, the platform they're using, their salespeople are using. Clearly AI was infused there, and it's kind of all the stuff you would expect in terms of a CRM, knowing who to contact, capturing information, recording calls, transcribing them, being able to surface relevant information at the right time, being able to batch communicate. They've talked about this AI human slider. And maybe there's a couple different sliders, but they can move it back and forth, right? Depending on kind of where we are as humanity, right? And not only what's working, but what makes the most sense and what feels good. So it can, if you batch it if you go to AI, you can batch up a ton of text messages or emails to go out customized for somebody. You can do AI to call out to certain people, or you can simply use it to take in a whole lot of data. And give a salesperson a prioritized list of who to call today, right now, based on everything else that we know. And when you're dealing with, the volume that Rocket is, that's very important. So I definitely see AI having, I mean, AI is having an impact there, and it's helping them do a lot of stuff faster, better, different. I get the sense that it's exponential, not incremental. When Varun was in my class, he was also one of my students asked this great question. Like, hey, with AI, what are you going to do? You're going to fire all these people? And the philosophy was no. We want to keep. We just want to do more with the people we have. So we can increase our efficiency. Our loan originators, our back end staff, everybody can just do more leveraging this. And that is kind of the philosophy that I saw and that permeates through the sales floor and talking to leaders across the organization. So I think, when a company stops pitching AI and starts just assuming it everywhere, I mean, that's the signal that it's becoming plumbing and it's kind of acting in the way that it should, right? It's a technology. If you go back 10 or 15 years, you don't have, I don't know, you don't have JavaScript meetings where everybody gets together and talks about how amazing JavaScript is and how we're going to implement it across the organization. It just kind of happens. And then it leads to other things, and that's what you sit down and focus on and talk about. So yeah, the bottom line out of all this stuff, great visit. Being in the field is amazing. And quick shout out to Detroit. Detroit's a pretty cool city. Rocket has had a huge hand in the rejuvenation of Detroit over time. And I got a tour of downtown and the buildings, purchased, renovated, are in, and they're amazing, right? I mean, if you think about these great old buildings kind of built in the, I don't know, 20s, 30s, 40s, in some cases out of bricks, like a 40-story brick skyscraper, crazy, but also beautiful. And, rehabilitating those in a way that doesn't just maximize your return, but it kind of maximizes the beauty and the quality of that. Gorgeous. So a lot of that kind of squished into a relatively small footprint downtown. But it was great. And, I mean, if somebody mentions Detroit, you get an image, in your mind. The image I now have in my mind is different than the one I had, and I would certainly go back, and I look forward to the opportunity to go back, not only to see the city, but to hang out with the great crew at Rocket and Redfin. But yeah, the bottom line for me was I went in with some skepticism around certain areas. I didn't necessarily buy this idea of servicing as a flywheel to the extent that's there. I didn't know what was motivating Rocket. What was the culture, right? Being able to see the culture firsthand, walking around, doing that, talking to, gosh, dozens of people was amazing. And seeing these, I don't know, green shoots, it seems like it's maybe underplaying it. The thing about Rocket is scale, incredible scale. I think I mean, the largest purchase loan originator on the planet. So this is a very big company, and they're doing a lot of a lot of things, and they've kind of pieced together this the components, the ingredients of what it would take to be a one-stop shop, the Holy Grail. It seems to be the dead set focus of what they're looking to do. And there's some great activity around all of that. So, I learned a lot about the numbers, what's driving that. And then also, getting more specific into that consumer pitch, because I think that's really key, right? You can't force somebody to go into a one-stop shop. You can't force a consumer there. But what is it going to take for the consumer to, not only enter the ecosystem, right? What's on the billboard, but once they're in the ecosystem, to stay in that ecosystem. And I go back to my conversation around servicing, right? Just it's building a relationship with somebody over time with the small things, not necessarily a handwritten card once a year or a basket of goodies, but the stuff they need to do, they want to do, they have to do on a regular monthly basis, how do we show up there first and just demonstrate that we are an awesome company, we wanna help them as often as we can? So, is the Grail real? Is it a myth? I mean, still investigating, still looking at all of that. I'm definitely curious to see how some of these initial initiatives play out, and I definitely wanna jump back into the field, talk to more folks, see what else is working and not working.